On this Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson Jr. was being debated over the weekend. Is he a 5? Is he a 4? What is the best road for the Grizzlies to travel this coming season regarding Jaren Jackson Jr.? We'll talk about that and check in with some Grizzlies division rivals as they continue their playoff journeys or perhaps end their playoff journeys. This is Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That intro remains fire, a fire intro for a fire podcast on this Fire Monday. It's a little bit warmer across most of the country, and hopefully wherever you're taking in this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, you've got good weather and even a better opportunity to spend the next 30 minutes or so with Damichael and I here on Locked On Grizzlies. That's right, the dynamic duo writing once more, Damichael Cole, the Commercial Appeal, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, and myself, Joe Mullinax, back with you here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I am competitive. I'm going to be honest. I was in a student-faculty basketball game this past weekend. I was talking trash to teenagers. Because of that competitiveness, I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts, make us a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time an episode drops. Hopefully you're an everydayer by this point, whether you check out an episode every time we come out with one, or whether this is your first time stopping by, or whether you're somewhere in between. Hopefully you'll make Damichael and myself part of your Memphis Grizzlies journey moving forward. You heard that right, partner. I'm surprised, first off, that you weren't there, because it was kind of a big deal. There was at least 40 people on hand to witness.
I know if Joe Mullinax was playing, it was a sold out crowd.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And one of the things that, and I think you and I have briefly talked about this before, but back when I was running Grizzly Bear Blues, there was always talk of like a media basketball game, like to do like a fundraiser for St. Jude, have Zach Randolph be a coach, Tony Allen be a coach, whatever. If they actually would show up to such an event. I'm a bit of a hooper, right? And I don't want to brag. But my stat line, I had 7 points in about 20 minutes of play. Okay. I had about 6 rebounds, 4 assists.
All around.
Steals. I was easily the best in plus minus. We kept track of that, of course. Why wouldn't you?
Who would you compare your game to? Grizzlies players now. Let's
Marc Gasol. Yeah, I'm Marc Gasol. That's what I am.
You're not Big Spain. You what do we call you? Big Virginia?
Big Virginia. Big country. There's already a big country, though. Brian Reeves, right?
There's a big country,
yeah. Big country 2.0, maybe you can call me. But no, it was a good time. I even at my advanced age, I can't even say I have advanced age because LeBron's 2 years older than me, and he's out there still doing amazing things in the playoffs. But yeah, it was a good time, and it's good to be talking basketball again with you, partner. I look forward to this conversation because I think it's going to be a continuing one. But I really wanted to just kind of tackle both ends of the Jaren Jackson Jr. It wasn't necessarily a debate over the weekend. And again, some of the topics we pull up here on Locked On Grizzlies are, based off of conversations we see in, Reddit or on X. Last week, Damichael did an episode that somebody asked for in the comments. So if you hit us up in the comments and you want an update on something, you want us to hit on a certain point of emphasis, we most certainly can do that. And we can briefly talk about the roster draft that we did on Friday, but to be honest with you, it was a landslide. I won. I think it was like 95% to 5%.
And let's throw something out there too, because I know some people were saying that it should have been a snake draft. It would have been more fair.
I offered that.
Joe did give me the option. I was like Joe says, he's competitive. I'm competitive too. I don't want any You don't have to give me any training wheels or give me an extra letter to hold my hand. I wanted it the hard way, and kind of burned me on the back end. He did have a better roster, but
I do think in the case of the Grizzlies in particular, right? If this was Locked On Thunder, they have 4 or 5 guys that maybe it expands
Yeah.
it a little bit. With Memphis, there's a clear big 3, and then it drops off. So I do think that was pretty important. But anyway, we have lots of places that we find motivation and inspiration for these conversations. And, one of them was, Sam Vecini, I think, had a thread on X over the weekend. I know Matt Hardlicka, who I used to work with at Grizzly Bear Blues, great writer, one of the best I've ever worked with. He's written a lot about this. How to use Jaren Jackson Jr., the perception of the draft pick. We won't get into the draft pick as much because we have a lot of content to fill in May and June leading up to the draft. But I do think tackling the question of the best way to use Jaren is a worthwhile exercise. As we prepare, starting May 1st, we are going to do our player review series. So starting Wednesday, we'll have John Morant. Thursday will be Jaren Jackson Jr. Friday will be Desmond Bane. And then we'll do our player reviews for the rest of the roster in a different format next week, just to give you kind of a roadmap of how this week is going to play out. But before we get to that, talking about what was, the continued emphasis on what will be Damichael, the idea of Jaren. Let's start off with him as a big, like a true big, a center. You watch the Oklahoma City Thunder in these playoffs, and I do think it's important to point out Brandon Ingram is clearly not himself. We'll make fun of the Pelicans later in the show, but Ingram's not fully healthy. Zion Williamson's not there. It's a wounded Pelicans team, but OKC is having a lot of success with the 5-out system, right? And if you go 5 out in Memphis, if you take a Donovan Clingan, you sign an Andre Drummond, whatever route you want to take in that way, it's really difficult to go with a 5-out offense. That is the modern game. I think we're seeing more and more of that. The best argument, in my opinion, and this is what Hardlicka and Vecini, I'm sure, would say, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but just having talked with both of those guys before, the idea of Jaren at the 5, even if it brings you rebounding limitations, if it creates so much offensive versatility, whether it's G.G. Jackson at the 4, Brandon Clark at the 4, there's lots of different stuff that you can do that would make the Grizzlies offense more versatile.
Yeah, you speak of it on the offensive end. I want to start on the defensive end here when we have this conversation about Jaren at center, because we know when you talk about rim protection, he can do that, right? He can protect the rim. But here's the thing. When you throw out Oklahoma City, the 5-out offense, Chet Holmgren can extend to the 3-point line, go off the dribble, all that stuff, just like Jaren can. But the difference, I think, when you look at OKC and why it works on the defensive end, is compared to what Memphis would have to do is just go down the line. They're solid defenders. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander led the NBA in steals. So, I mean, he was drafted in the lottery more for his defense and offense. People don't remember that, but I was at UT. That was my. I was there when he beat the Vols in the SEC tournament in St. Louis. I seen it. This guy, it was defense first with him at that point. As he was coming up, so solid defender, always has been. Jalen Williams is turning into one of the premier two-way young players in the game. Lou Dort, that's kind of how he carved his way out in the league. They got 3 guys they could throw on the perimeter. And, I mean, Josh Giddey isn't bad himself, but those 3 guys in particular, you can say, you got him, and you got him. Let's go. And they will hold their own. In Memphis, you want to get to that point, but can you say that right now? If you got Jaren protecting the rim, you're confident in a Marcus Smart. You're confident in a Vince Williams, right? But those 2 aren't going to be on the floor together. More so, you're going to need Desmond Bane to be that, and he's improved as a defender, but you're going to need him to take that next step. Like Jalen Williams is legit 2-way. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander he's one of the best in the league playing the passing lanes right now. And he never has to guard the top guys like that anymore, but he's capable. We've seen it. Lou Dort, as a rookie, came in guarding the top guys, and now he's guarding the number 2s, while Jalen Williams, for the most part, is getting the number 1s. Like they alternated, like they have multiple guys. That's the difference. As it comes to the offensive end, Joe, we've talked about it a lot. Jaren at the 5 spaces the floor out, which we think would be great for the pairing with him and Ja. We'll talk about it later. How historically speaking, Jaren at the 4, works, but the problems with Jaren at the 4 are mostly come in those lineups with Ja Morant in certain stretches, because he and Ja, their games haven't necessarily mixed from the standpoint of Jaren, trying to be a paint present, being that 4 who's going to post up against smaller matchups, while Ja wants to take the basket, while Jaren isn't necessarily a role threat. And you have another big, typically Steven Adams or Jonas Valanciunas in the past, with 0 3-point shooting threat pretty much. So it's a clogged up paint. Whereas you put Jaren at the 5, space the floor. I think that's the way you can maximize him and John Morant on the floor on the offensive end. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the defensive end to me. If you want to see this lineup pairing, that fifth starter spot that we keep talking about, that needs to be an ace-type defender. That needs to be someone who can be your Jalen Williams, who can be your Lou Dort, to go with a Marcus Smart, to go with a Vince Williams, and you can kind of hold your own that way.
And ideally could be a good rebounder too, right? I think that we have to call a spade at this point. Jaren can continue to improve as a rebounder. He's never going to be a lead in that area. So, there has to be, and John Morant, to his credit, is, I think, an above average rebounder for his position. Desmond Bane can be at times as well. I just want to make sure that we understand there's trade-offs to everything, right? And we'll talk more about Jaren as a power forward and the positives of that in our next segment. I see both sides. And I also want to, because I'm team Fee Fi Fo Fum, I want them to draft Donovan Clingan. Just because you draft Donovan Clingan or you prioritize bringing in a traditional big doesn't mean they have to start. And it sure as heck doesn't mean they have to close, right? Like, that's an important piece of this. You can bring in a Clingan and have him play 20 to 25 minutes off the bench. And I think that you can still get some value out of that draft pick on a team that has a lot of guys that are prepared to contribute to winning basketball, especially hopefully in the playoffs this time next year. Damichael, you and I are talking about a playoff series and not theorizing what position Jaren Jackson Jr. will be best at.
We will be.
I would imagine
Let me put my Charles Barkley on. Guaranteed.
And I can't wait to talk more about Chuck and his view of the Pelicans here in a little bit. But that was Jaren as a center. I think that there's pros and cons, like Damichael and I just talked about. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will discuss Jaren as a power forward, why he should be, maybe why he shouldn't be, in terms of the argument against him as a 4 as opposed to a 5. I'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. For example, the 2024 Nissan Rogue, perfect for city drives and great escapes. Gone are the days of connecting your phone with Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play Store, all built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Or maybe you're like me. You have a big family. The Nissan Armada 2024 changes what you expect from a full-size SUV. A rugged 4x4 seats up to 8 and first-class luxury and style. You can tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Armada, or even the Nissan Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right. We got to pause here and remind you how fun Monopoly Go is. I know what you're thinking. You guys already have talked about Monopoly Go. We know what's going on there, but there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments, working together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes that you can unlock. And there's so much more that you can get, like playing pieces to travel the boards with, emojis that you can taunt friends with when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. So many have their own unique mini games, digging for treasure, robot pachinko machines, and there's new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Monopoly Go, game on. Damichael, in the first segment, we talked about Jaren as a center. You touched on the defensive side of things. I talked a little bit more offensively, modeling after Oklahoma City because their coach just won Coach of the Year. They're the youngest team to be the 1 seed in history. They are essentially what the Grizzlies were the last 2 seasons, right? They've kind of filled that void in terms of being the young team that everybody thinks is the future of the Western Conference. We'll see what happens next season when the Grizzlies are healthy, at least theoretically healthy. The reason I say we'll see what happens is, again, before OKC was that, it was the Grizzlies. And Steven Adams was a pretty important contributor to that. Folks that have been following the show for a while, you and I, we don't disagree often, but we had one of our first big disagreements on Steven Adams. I like Steven Adams, but I was okay with moving on from him. You thought that was a mistake. You said that here. You wrote about it over the commercial appeal as part of your award-winning season that you just completed as the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer there. Jaren as the 4, statistically speaking, and different ways to twist numbers, I understand that. It's pretty clear at this point that Jaren, statistically at least, is better as a 4 than as a 5.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you bring in another floor spacing 5 as opposed to a bruiser like a Klingon or a Drummond? Maybe that's a conversation you have, trying to find somebody else that can be that 5-out guy that can still be a bigger player so that Jaren can play the 4 in terms of size. I don't know who that person would be. It feels like that's a little bit more rare. I will say that if the Grizzlies win the lottery and move up to number 1, problem solved, right? Because you draft Alex Sarr, and now Jaren is the 4, while you can still play 5-out offensive basketball. Sarr's not a great three-point shooter, but he has skill sets that suggest they could do some 5-out skills. Yeah, correct. He does. I've
seen him getting compared to Jaren too.
I
forget who did it, but
he's a bigger Jaren Jackson Jr. I think Kevin O'Connor of the Ringer compares him to Triple J. So if they win the lottery, they can do it. They can have their cake and eat it too. But it's unlikely they do that, as we know. To me, the best argument for Jaren as a power forward is on that defensive end, as you alluded to earlier in the show. It allows for him to be a weak side defender. He won the Defensive Player of the Year in part because of the position he played while Steven Adams ate those minutes as a true center. That is where Jaren has thrived the most as a elite player. While Jaren improved as a two-way player this season, Damichael, I don't think anybody would say he was an elite two-way player. He was a very good two-way player, I think is a fair way to describe him. He was an elite defender. When we've seen him the most impactful, it's been as a power forward.
Yeah, I'm sensing something here. We talk more about the defense of him when we talk about him at the 4, and then we talk more about the offense when we talk about him at the 5. So there's a give and take at the end of the day with this conversation. When you play him at the 5, you're probably losing something on one side of the ball, getting something more on the other side of the ball, and vice versa. Now let's get into the conversation about him at the 4. I completely agree with you. The idea that he's overall a better player, but it's the team a better team, because Jaren's a better player for sure. He's an all-star as a 4 because he's gonna be bigger than everyone that matches up against him more times than not, unless it's Karl Anthony Towns, with the Timberwolves. But more times than not, he's gonna be bigger than that guy, so he's gonna bruise his way, win that matchup, get some fouls drawn. He's gonna be able to freeload a little bit. You kind of play that freestyle type of defense, get some blocks from the weak side, and just hanging around, just cleaning up mistakes of teammates and things like that. So it makes him look like a better player. But let's put it like this, Joe. I'm just yes or no question here. Is Ja Morant? Sure. Would you consider him an above average 3-point shooter?
No.
Okay, so that's one. The centers that the Grizzlies have had in the past, would you consider that person above average 3-point shooter, from Steven Adams, Xavier Tillman, Brandon Clark, and Jonas Valanciunas?
No.
Okay, so that's 2 starters already that you're talking about are not above average 3-point shooters if you're playing Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 4. Jaren Jackson Jr., let's go through his 3-point numbers for his career. 35.9% as a rookie, 39.4%, the second season, 28.3% in the small sample size in that third year, 31.9% after that. The last 2 seasons, the All-Star year, he was at 35.5%. This past season, 32% as a 3-point shooter. The point is, for his career, he's 34.5%. That's below league average. So let's call a spade here. If you put Jaren at the 4, you're saying I'm fine with having 3 below league average 3-point shooters in a lineup in today's NBA. That's what you're okay with. Not only just that, though. Ja Morant's style is so much more. It's better when he has floor space. That's why you saw the on-off numbers with him and Luke Kennard on the floor last season. Him and Desmond Bane on the floor together. When he has those type of players on the floor with him, it's electric. But you're making it easier on the defense when they can say, "Oh, we can sag off of Jaren. We can sag off of this big." And with all due respect to Marcus Smart, the numbers have come and gone over his career. But historically speaking, teams aren't going to be petrified of him at the 3-point line either. So it's just, if you put him at the 4 right now with the way that the team is currently constructed, I don't see how defenses aren't able to load up on Ja Morant, because they're going to make these other guys beat you. And they can still prioritize Desmond Bane, because they can say, oh, I think teams will be fine if Marcus Smart and Jaren Jackson Jr. combine to make 10 threes to beat them. I think teams are going to be willing to live with that. So that's the only problem. Now, defensively, the Grizzlies would be outstanding. So you're weighing both sides here. We have plenty of proof with Jaren at the 4. This team won 56 games. They won 51 games. It was big parts of both of those seasons. It is proven that it can work over the course of the regular season. The problems have come up in the playoffs. When they played the Lakers and Ja Morant couldn't get any good looks around the rim because Anthony Davis just lurking around the basket and whatnot. Or when they played the Timberwolves and Jared Vanderbilt, Jaden McDaniels, Karl Anthony Towns are all just lurking around the basket waiting on Ja Morant. When they played the Golden State Warriors and Draymond Green, Kevon Looney, all these guys are just loading up at the basket waiting on Ja. That's when it shows up. And I think to maximize the team on both ends, that's going to be the give and take. You need multiple above average 3-point shooters in that lineup.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Karl Anthony Towns, ironically, the money most certainly won't work. Towns, if you wanted to bring him in as the center and Jaren as the 4, maybe that helps. But
you got Naz Reid, the 6th man.
Right? No, that's true too. The guy, it's amazing. I talked about the Naz Reid contract last summer.
You did.
And then there were 2 or 3 people that, update on this. You know what I mean? It's amazing how they hold on to that stuff. He looks like a bargain right now. But again, why would the Timberwolves trade Naz Reid? They look like they're about to sweep the Suns, or gentlemen sweep the Suns and move on to the next round. I would bank on the Timberwolves, depending on their willingness to pay the luxury tax, more than I would bank on the Thunder, at least in the short term, in this playoff run, if that makes sense. But I'm very curious to see how all that plays out. It sounds like we're acknowledging that Jaren at the center may be best for the team, whereas Jaren as a power forward might be best for Jaren. How the team evolves, I think it's fascinating, right? Because we know, as you mentioned, they can win a lot of games with him as power forward, but can they win a championship in the modern NBA? Question. That's the question. And in fairness, I need to be consistent. Are we trying to win a championship or not? So, I'm still Donovan Clingan. Doesn't mean he has to start. Maybe that does impact what kind of free agent they go for with the mid-level exception if they're able to do that. It's going to be a fascinating summer when it comes to, you were there on breakdown day. Zach Kleiman said repeatedly they are going to get a big. Yeah. What kind of big, how their talent and what they acquire or what they give up to try to acquire said player is going to be fascinating to watch. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to finish out this episode checking in on the NBA playoffs, a couple of division rivals in 2 very different places entering into this next week of NBA playoff basketball. But first, I want to remind you, Damichael and I have had a wonderful conversation about Jaren Jackson Jr. No screaming, no yelling. This isn't ESPN or Fox Sports. You don't have to turn down the volume here because there's not that kind of shouting. If you want more of this kind of content, you can check out Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by DoorDash. Make sure you're checking out DoorDash whenever you are able to, especially this Mother's Day. Flowers, gifts from the brand she loves. You can have it all the very same day delivered with DoorDash. Maybe mom has a sweet tooth. Maybe she loves flowers. Maybe she likes a good latte. You can get her a gift card, coffee, whatever the case might be, a delicious treat. All of that can come from DoorDash. With a Dash Pass membership, you will save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees may apply, like its service fee, and again, terms can apply. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, closing out this episode, I'm going to make fun of the Pelicans. Damichael's going to talk about Kyrie. We're going to have some fun. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication, award-winning Memphis Grizzlies beat writer. We had a great conversation about Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm sure those talks will continue in the days, weeks, and months ahead, especially once, the playoffs are over, draft time comes, free agency trades, all that sort of stuff. But first, the Grizzlies' rivals in the Southwest Division, teams like the Mavericks, teams like the Pelicans. It's fun to live vicariously through them right now and watch them compete. Obviously, the Rockets, the Spurs, and the Grizzlies are three teams in that division that are not in the postseason. It's cool to watch the Mavs and the Pelicans. I know there's something in particular that you wanted to focus on with the Mavs, but I want to talk about how the Pelicans basically have embarrassed themselves. And obviously, Zion Williamson is not on the floor.
Joe,
that's a major
It can't work, Joe. This team, it can't work.
Brandon Ingram obviously is not at full strength.
Yeah.
But, when Charles Barkley is on, NBA Today.
Oh, boy. I know what you're about to say.
Inside the NBA, excuse me. And he is talking about they can't go to Cancun. They got to be sent to Galveston, Texas. He wants to. I saw Shaquille O'Neal. It looked like his head was going to explode. He was laughing so hard, talking about that dirty water. The Pelicans. I think you're.
I like
right.
Galveston, Texas. By the way.
Yeah, shout out to Galveston, Texas.
Yeah.
I agree.
Good
They were
food
getting a
down
bad rep. You can't compare it to Cancun, but you can't compare a lot of places to Cancun. I agree with you, and maybe that's something we can talk about either this week or next week once the Pelicans are eliminated. The Mavericks are in a little bit more of a series. I think it's tied 2-2 at this point. And that is not the case for New Orleans. I'm curious to see how they respond, whether it's, moving on from Jonas Valanciunas, trading a Brandon Ingram or a Zion Williamson. It looks like it can't work the way that it's currently constructed in Ola.
Yeah, I think Jonas. I mean, he's for sure toast. That's why I brought him up on the show the other day. He's out of there. The question I think now is Bi or Zion, and I think it's very clear if you watch that the game against the Lakers, and if you watch this game, this series. Bi is not fully healthy or whatnot, but I think you build around Zion already because you got the pieces that fit better around him. Like you have great wing role players and Trey Murphy, one of the best shooters, and you got a great 3-and-D. Herb Jones is knocking down 3-pointers now, so he is a good elite player at his game, and he's one of the better defenders. I voted him second team all defense, and he's knocking down the three. So you got those two guys. You can move off of Brandon Ingram. And then you figure the point guard situation out with C.J. McCollum and whatever the case may be. But I think the more pressing thing is, Brandon Ingram likes to play out of the mid-range and whatnot, and Zion at the rim. It's not going to work. So, that's tough for them. I don't see that one working out.
I would agree. Something that is working out right now is the Dallas Mavericks, whoever wins that series between the Mavs and the Clippers, them and OKC is going to be a bloodbath. I really, if the Thunder get out of
there's
that
a big storyline there either way it goes. I can't wait to see.
That's going to be the Western Conference semifinals. Because again, assuming it's Denver and Minnesota, like those are going to be some titans squaring off. Maybe 2 7-game series. I'm curious to see how that plays out. But you picked up on something on X, on social media, people loving up Kyrie Irving a little bit, and I don't want to say you took offense to it, partner, but you have some questions.
I got some questions for sure because the title of this is how soon do they forget, Joe?
Very quickly, short-term memories.
And I know that's the case around here, but I love Kyrie Irving's finishing ability. I tweeted or posted on X several times about his game. Like it's beautiful. I want to be a writer like Kyrie Irving plays basketball. Like it's so he's like Maya Angelou or something. Like dude is
Kyrie
amazing.
Irving is a hooper.
He's a hooper. You can go throw him on the street right now. He'll destroy whoever. But with all that being said, we saw the fancy layup towards the end he made. I think it was on Paul George, James Harden. There was one more player in there, probably Amir Coffey or Terrence Mann, one of those dudes. And he made the layup over 3 dudes going down to the ground, acrobatic and whatnot. And you see people say, oh, man, that's only Kyrie can do that. Only Kyrie can do that. Granted, Kyrie is one of the few dudes that could ever do that, but how soon do they forget Joe Mullinax? Ja Morant, yeah, I know the shoulder injury and the surgery and the suspension this year, the suspension last year, the Instagram lives and all that. Did y'all forget that this dude just 2 years ago led the league at 6'3" in paint points? At 6'3". Not only did he lead the league, I was talking to these opposing coaches pregame. We got to keep Ja Morant out the paint. We got to keep Ja Morant out the paint. They still couldn't do it. And it's the floater. It's the left hand. It's the right hand. It's dunking on you. Yes, Kyrie Irving is one of the best finishers we've ever seen. But it's two guys that really come to mind. And Derrick Rose is the other one for you when you talk about his prime and what he was. But we're talking about the right now. How soon do they forget? Left hand, right hand, dunk on you, floater. Ja Morant has all of it. 6'3", leaping ability. Look, I think all this is just going to be logged in the back of his head, Joe. He's taking mental notes, and he's going to have some extra reasons to be motivated. I think Ja Morant is, when you talk about, oh man, Kyrie is the only guy that can do that, you should definitely say he's one of the few guys, because we've seen Ja do these things multiple times.
Ja Morant's comeback player of the year would be pretty hilarious, considering some of the
two-time comeback player of the year.
He's coming back from. That's exactly right.
Wait, most improved and comeback player.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. So, I agree with you, and I do think we're going to sound, or at least I'm going to sound, kind of petty. And the Grizzlies are going to be in the playoffs next season, and we're going to be reminded of how good this team is. I think Zach Kleiman is well aware that they have to find a way to make this team as competitive as possible. Because, again, Victor Wembanyama's coming, and I'm afraid of what the league is going to look like once he figures it out completely. Nikola Jokic is not going anywhere. There's got to be ways that you address that big man rotation and position to try to maximize your current roster that you invested so much money in, your core three guys, plus a G.G. Jackson, a Vince Williams Jr., who figure to be among the core, maybe not money-wise, but contract length now. They're going to do something, and what that something is a topic that Damichael and I will continue to discuss and debate as the offseason grinds forth here on Locked On Grizzlies. Our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies is going to be on May 1st. That's right, there will be no Tuesday edition, barring some breaking news. Maybe a Grizzlies player gets an award, or there's some sort of issue with Memphis, whatever the case might be. We might come back around for that, but Damichael and I also are kind of planning on ending April on a bit of a breather. We'll come back May 1st on Wednesday, and we'll be beginning, Damichael, our player review series, starting with the aforementioned Ja Morant. With the bigger names, our structure of the episodes, Damichael, I believe we agreed on things that we liked from Ja, things that we didn't like, and then what we hope they work on over the summer. For me, it's going to be that three-point shot that you mentioned earlier in the show. Yeah,
we've said that a bunch of years now. And
that's true.
I get it. It's still going to be a high priority, especially coming off a shoulder injury. I wonder how that, maybe before that show, I'm going to try to reach out to some shooting coaches or something to see how does that play into that? When we'll get some insight to add there on if that labral tear has any, I know it's not going to be like a Markelle Fultz situation or anything that. I don't want people to think, he's going to have a hitch in his shot coming back or anything. No, it's just, it's mental, just like with guys who get ACL injuries and, they leap for the first time and, they make certain cuts and stuff like that. But, I think that's a big part of it. But, excited to do these player reviews, a lot of guys to break down. Look, we're not talking about all these other guys who came in for 5 days, say, hey, what's up, hello, nice to meet you, and left. We're talking about the Grizzlies players who played extensive time on this team and who have extensive roles going forward.
Correct. That'll be our focus. And we'll start with Ja, Jaren, and Bane to close out our week. Again, no Tuesday show, barring some breaking news. We'll be back on Wednesday, starting off May strong with our Ja Morant player review, year in review episode. Until then, make sure you're staying locked in. Make sure you like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify, on Amazon. Hopefully you're an everydayer. You're subscribed every time an episode drops. you're with us. Damichael appreciates it, as do I. Make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and the free Amazon Channels app on Amazon Fire. Make sure that you are sticking with us all off season long. Again, barring some breaking news, we'll be taking Tuesday off. We'll catch you back here Wednesday on Locked On Grizzlies, starting off May with our Ja Morant player review. Until next time, he's Damichael. I'm Joe. Have a good one, Grizzlies fans.